Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, text number 43. Dhritarashtra quits home. Let's read the Sanskrit. Yathā krīḍopaskarāṇāṁ saṁyoga-vigamāv icchayā krīḍituḥ syātāṁ tathaiveśecchayā nṛṇām. As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them. We must know for certain that for the particular position in which we are now set up is an arrangement of the supreme will in terms of our own acts in the past. The Supreme Lord is present as the localized Paramatma in the heart of every living being, as it is said in Bhagavad Gita 13:23, and therefore he knows everything of our activities in every stage of our lives. He rewards the reactions of our actions by placing us in some particular place. A rich man gets his son born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but the child who came as the rich man's son deserved such a place, and therefore he is placed there by the will of the Lord. And at a particular moment when the child has to be removed from that place, he is also carried by the will of the Supreme, even if the child or the father does not wish to be separated from the happy relation. The same thing happens in the case of a poor man also. Neither rich man nor poor man has any control over such meetings or separations of living beings. The example of a player and his playthings should not be misunderstood. One may argue that since the Lord is bound to award reactionary results of our own actions, the example of a player cannot be applied. But it is not so. We must always remember that the Lord is the supreme will, and he is not bound by any law. Generally, the law of karma is that one is awarded the result of one's own actions. But in special cases, by the will of the Lord, such resultant actions are changed also. But this change can be effected by the will of the Lord only and no other. Therefore, the example of the player cited in this verse is quite appropriate, for the supreme will is absolutely free to do whatever he likes, because he is all perfect and there is no mistake in any of his actions or reactions. These changes of resultant actions are especially rendered by the Lord when a pure devotee is involved. It is assured in the Bhagavad Gita 9:30-31 that the Lord saves a pure devotee who is surrendered unto him without reservation from all sorts of reactions of sins, and there is no doubt about this. There are hundreds of examples of reactions changed by the Lord in the history of the world. If the Lord is able to change the reactions of one's past deeds, then certainly he is not himself bound by any action or reaction of his own deeds. He is perfect and transcendental to all laws. So we see that the particular example that's used here is as a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them. There doesn't seem to be any controversy in that situation. I mean, the laws of karma are acting, and that's Prabhupada makes that point, that the father and the son, they come together. Okay, the father may be rich, so that the son seems to get a big advantage because he's born with a silver spoon in the mouth. That's as Prabhupada puts it. But he's due to get that because of his past karma. He's meant to get that silver spoon situation. Then there's another example. It's a rich man and a poor man coming together. Neither the rich man or the poor man can have any control over such meetings. The Lord, one may argue that the Lord is bound to give the results. So this is really what's going on here, is that there's kind of the laws of karma are working. Now, even to start with, most people don't actually understand the laws of karma. I'm saying most people, but just because if you read the media today, or you listen into any radio program, it doesn't come up that the laws of karma are there. It comes up in a very facile, a very not really understanding the whole point. It's brought up, it's said, oh yeah, it must be karma or something like that. It doesn't have any understanding of the kind of the deeper laws of karma that are in action in all activities. In another sense, it is, because if you look at the what people are talking today about the world, it was the front pages actually, basically, in the Guardian yesterday was explaining about all the difficulties that are happening in the world. 1/3 of the deaths are due to man-made influences because of the climate change, and 1/3 of actual deaths that are occurring are based because of activities of people. So they're finding a direct result of how we act. I suppose the laws of action and reaction are there in the courts. If somebody commits a particular crime, then he's actually sent to prison, for instance, or is given a suspended sentence or whatever. But he has to go before the courts. So these laws are there, and we're all to some degree aware of them. There's a tendency, though, as well, where people try to be above the law. And in some certain instances, the king is above the law, it's said. I think we've seen recently in politics, a recent president in America, he basically wanted to do what he wanted to do without having any consequences, or he didn't follow laws, but just made the laws, and therefore tried to create a whole new set of laws. That's a kind of a dangerous precedent, because then it's the law of the jungle. Might is right. Anyone can do what they want to do. But the laws were set up by the laws of states were set up by so-called intelligent people, so that people's rights could be preserved, and that you could live in your home without fear of being attacked by somebody else, because there was a consequence if that goes on. So you'll find that laws are there in twofold. One is that you will be your own rights will be protected, and number two, if there's any transgression, and people will think twice about acting in a certain way, which could land them in hot water or give them a difficult situation. So these are just kind of common laws that go on in everyday life. You stay within the law, so that you actually don't get punished. But these are man-made laws as well, in general, but there are other laws too, and Prabhupada refers to it in the purport. He talks about 930, which is apichet sudharacharo bhajate mam ananyabhak, in which a devote, there's two kind of I'll just read it to you what Prabhupada said about it. The different natures. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. One is conditional, and the other is constitutional. As for protecting the body or abiding by the rules of society and state, certainly there are different activities, even for the devotees, in connection with conditional life, and such activities are called conditional. Besides this, the living entity who is fully conscious of a spiritual nature and is engaged in Krishna consciousness or the devotional service of the Lord, has activities which are called transcendental. Such activities are performed in his constitutional position, and they are technically called devotional service. So we have those two different things which are going on. Tomorrow's purport talks about the force. I can't really find the page. Oh yeah. The actual fact is that every living being is an individual part of the parcel of the Supreme Being, and its constitutional position is subordinate cooperative service. So that is our, constitutional position. Subordinate cooperative service. Now, conditional service is based on these laws that Prabhupada is talking about, is the laws of karma. And the context in which he's talking about them here is that Dhritarashtra has just left, and Narada is coming to give some consolation to Yudhishthira that, okay, you're feeling very aggrieved because your uncles have left and your aunt has left and they were under your protection. But now they're taken away from your protection. So therefore, what are you going to do? So he's explained to them that they're not really under his protection, and that people come together just because of the laws of nature, and then they go again. And that's all ordained by the supreme will of Krishna, either through his material energy or through his spiritual energy. And then in the next part of the purport, Prabhupada actually starts to talk about that Krishna actually intervenes in certain instances. And Prabhupada goes on to say that there's hundreds or thousands of times. There are hundreds of examples, of reactions changed by the Lord in the history of the world. Okay, can you name any? Anybody listening there, can anyone name any reactions during that the Lord has intervened? People sometimes they like to think that the Lord has intervened in their own lives, and that's a fact. Because Krishna is intervening on the constitutional level, the nature of the soul or devotional service, and therefore he can change one's whole course in life just by suddenly one hears or one remembers one's past position by the circumstances, but something which happens, something which changes a person's course of life. And then there's this very important part, which is that just by the association of a pure devotee, a lava matra or something is the name of it, is 1/11 of a second association with a pure devotee can change the whole trajectory of one's life. One may be heading in a certain direction based on karma, creating further reactions, going into the next situation, creating further reactions. But just by the association of a devotee, one can actually change one's whole direction and go back into one's constitutional position. So it's quite a miraculous thing. And that's why Prabhupada wants the devotees of the Lord who take this position then to try to actually change the position for others as well. It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? Is, okay, you've got something. So, okay, don't just sit in your laurels. Get off your bum and go and do something, So that seems to be the situation. That, this sitting down it can also be just the modes of nature still acting. And, that's why there's also stages of devotional service, because you can't just because you come onto a certain stage or you start the process of Bhakti Yoga then to automatically assume everything's going to be sorted for you. It's not that way at all. So what happens then? Is it that, okay, so therefore I'm going to purposely try to go back to the spiritual world, so I'm going to try to bring others there? Yes and no. We have to have that instruction there that we're trying to follow the order of the spiritual master. So there's a subtle difference. Like we're trying to follow the order of the spiritual master, or we're trying to go back to Godhead. So which of the two? The one could be trying to go back to Godhead, for instance, or it could be a kind of a liberation kind of mentality that's going on there. I want to get free from the pains and I want to enjoy better, you know. More subtly, I want to go to heaven where I can enjoy heavenly delights. But there's no real escape here. You can't kind of make your way out of it like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu. They wanted to have what they thought. So we still have that mentality. It's deep rooted. Anyabhilasha sunam jnana karma inavritam. You know, jnana and karma. You know, we think we can force the laws of nature by karma, by acting in a certain way so we can get a result. And then we force, you know, Krishna, the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, to give us a result. And what was that? The Karma Mimamsa philosophy. Krishna is obliged to give us the result because we're acting in a certain way. But the real problem there is that we think we're still in control, you know. And that's where the bhakti is different, because you surrender unto Krishna. And that's not just an easy thing to do. Because we're kind of so full. Why would Rupa Goswami make that verse, Jnana Karma Navritam? Why would he say it? Because he knows what we're like. He's very clear on our position, how we're affected by the laws of material nature, and so therefore he's warning us, you know, not to get up on our high horse, because that's so easy. You know, the whole section of the Vedas talks about humility. Lord Chaitanya says it, Srinada Pisa Nityanā Tarora Pisa Hishna Manina Manadina Kirtanya Sadarti. The minute we get a little bit of knowledge, we get a little bit of insight, and then we start telling everybody about it, you know. This is a great deviation, because we are not realizing that everything that we're getting is coming from Krishna. Every little insight we get, we're just following the instruction of the spiritual master. He's following the instruction of his spiritual master, and this knowledge is coming down in disciplic succession. It's descending knowledge, and we just happen to be very dependent and we're fortunate on the mercy of the previous acharyas. That's how we get our any sort of benefit that we have, any type of insight that we have, is because of the previous acharyas. And also this verse, just abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. I can protect you from all sinful activities. Do not fear. So that verse also proves what Prabhupada is saying here, that Krishna intervenes. Just if you surrender, he'll intervene. And also in Chaitanya Leela, Krishna, you don't even have to surrender. Krishna will just intervene. But you have to be qualified. You know, it's not as if you can still keep on doing your nonsense. And that's why Prabhupada again goes on to this verse, Apichet Sudaracharos Bhajate Mamanyanyabhak Sadhur Eva Samantavya. Let me see what the last line is. Buddha Bhava Samambita. Sadhur Eva Samantavya saṁyoga-vigamāv. That even if one commits the most abominable action, if he's engaged in devotional service, in other words, if he's in the spiritual energy, is considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. So that's to do with a pure devotee who's perfectly situated, not persons who are not perfectly situated. And if you try to use that whole idea that Krishna will protect me, even if I do any nonsense, again, you're just back into the whole karma creating activities of I'm in control, I can do what I want. Because that's... Sometimes I'm in touch with some younger devotees, men, and they're creating their future, which is good. You have to plan and everything. It's very important. You know, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. But even when you plan, it's there's no guarantees. It's Krishna can award or not award as he desires, and we're not so much in control as we think we are. We're actually very limited, especially managers. Like, they feel like they can dictate things, but really it's the 2 fingers too short at the when the Yashoda is trying to bind Krishna. Krishna, when he sees the sweat coming and she's really determined, then he says, okay, then I will allow. But it doesn't happen before that, especially if you're planning or wanting to be involved in devotional service. You cannot direct things as you want, You have to try your best to endeavour and then just depend on Krishna's mercy. And as I said, I was talking to some younger devotees who are planning the future. But, as the years gone by, I've tried to plan so many futures. And ultimately I have to accept whatever Krishna has said. That's the reality. And I have to try to show Krishna I'm determined to try to serve him in a certain way, or I try to serve the order of the spiritual master in a certain way. But Krishna's not obliged, he's not obliged to do anything. And another interesting point which came from that, which I was listening to recently, Gauranga Prabhu was giving this class on Dandavats, and he talked about our estimation of devotees. Sometimes we estimate a devotee by what they can do, what we think that they can do, or how they fit, even worse still, how they fit into our plans of doing things. But Krishna has his own personal relationship with every devotee, and that is something we have to be very conscious of, and it's a sacrosanct position. Krishna is bringing each devotee along according to his will, not according to our will. And we may try to help, or we may have something in regards to a devotee, and we may cooperate, and we may do things together and so on. But the whole idea of trying to control some person it's highly dangerous, and power is like that. Absolute power corrupts. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've heard that statement. So anyone who's taking a leadership position has to really understand, I'm doing this as a service to Krishna. I have no leadership over anybody. I have no power over anybody. But in order to try to fulfill the order of the spiritual master and the order of Krishna, I may take a position. I may issue some instruction, and ultimately then it's up to Krishna. And again, that instruction is based on one's his connection with Krishna through the super soul. One has to protect that relationship with Krishna very, very seriously, because it's so dangerous to think that I'm the doer of activities. Prakriti kriyamana nigunai karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimutatma kartaham iddhimanite. I'm the doer of activities that are in fact carried out by nature. And if it's not carried out by nature, it's carried out by the will of the Supreme. If we're fortunate enough to have that relationship with Krishna, we understand what we're doing, that Krishna is inspiring. He's inspiring us from within to act in a certain way in the Lord's service. So that's the position that we're trying to get to. But that can bring with it certain opulences or abilities. But then again, Krishna is the ability in man. So many different examples of that. So ultimately, everything's happening by the divine will, by Krishna's will, and why is for Krishna's pleasure. And as parts and parcels of Krishna, we will be saturated with pleasure if we can connect with Krishna, if we keep our connection very strong with Krishna. And that means that we have to be very careful of the false ego, the hankara vimutatma, which is constantly trying to establish itself as the controller. And we're so used to it, and it's such an addiction in society. That's what the whole material world is about, is people trying to be enjoyers or controllers, and trying to determine and to try to enact situations so that they can be that. Even whole world wars are fought on that basis, that I'm the most important, I'm the most aristocratic. These are things, the demoniac nature, and the demoniac nature is trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, and the tendency to enjoy in a way that is against the laws of nature brings with it huge suffering in its wake. It says it's pleasure in the beginning, but it's poison at the end. And the devotee then learns how to be even-minded amidst happiness and distress, fame or infamy, honor or dishonor, because those activities are going on anyway, based on our previous karma. So we don't, a wise man does not participate in them. And one just observes them, as a devotee. At the same time, one has some will, and so one tries to fulfill the order of the spiritual master, and that gives you, or gives us, a purpose in life, and then we can act in our own constitutional position, and then we get the understanding of what it is like to be in that constitutional position in relation with Krishna. So therefore, we come to the stage of, for one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, I never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So we're aware of Krishna, and in our chanting we're aware of Krishna. Sometimes the chanting can get distracted, even in so-called service matters. We can be drifting off and solving difficulties in our chanting, and that's based on anxiety or worry or the fearing mentality. We're so worried that our mind gets stuck into trying to sort something out, which it won't work out anyway, and it's just exhibiting that lack of satisfaction, lack of faith, that Krishna is in control, and we've nothing to worry about. The main worry, of course, is what will happen to us at death. And there's people have gone into extreme mentalities to try to avoid that. The atheist is like that. He says, well, after death everything is finished. So that's the atheist way of trying to numb out. It's like it's a dumb out, you might say. Another dumb atheist. He numbs out his any inkling that he can get some insight from something beyond himself. He dumbs and numbs that out, and in order to be able to just to be, it's like a sociopath. He's not sympathetic to himself, actually, and that's why that verse is called as the killer of one's own self. They're the only people who can't understand God, and that's what it is. We have a sociopathical tendency, and it's foremost exemplified in oneself, one's lack of understanding of one's eternality, or one's lack of compassion even for oneself. So one adopts this atheistic mentality and shuts everything out, except one's crucifyingly boring false ego or mind, being dictated to by the mind, which is under the dictation of the intelligence, the material intelligence, which is under the dictation of the false ego. Atheists can sound very, may even seemingly sound convincing, or they're convincing to themselves anyway. They don't like to be contradicted. So they're in a very difficult state of trying to be in control of things, trying to have an understanding of things, and but still stuck in the frog-like well of one's mentality, and is ready to be swallowed up by the snake of time. And so we've got the kind of the how would you call it, the unenviable task, or the non gratifying task, or no one praises us for trying to wake up a person like that. There is a sense in that we're not able to wake up a person like that. You can't wake up somebody who's trying to be asleep or is pretending to be asleep. But but yeah, that's what the devotees does. But the devotee is often hear Vaisheshika Prabhu make this point that as a devotee we can't, we just pick the ripe fruits. We don't go disturbing the atheistic kind of class of person. We can see the atheistic nature in everybody, and we can maybe try to rectify it in someone who's somewhat innocent. Plus, as I said about sympathy, we have to be sympathetic towards ourselves, and we try to rectify the atheistic mentality that's there in us, and the false ego that's there in us. We try our best to rid ourselves of those things. So in that way, then, just to get back to the point that's been made in the purport, in that way, then we can actually try to experience the mentality that Narada wants us to experience, and the mentality that he's telling to Yudhishthira, not to be attached to his uncles, not to be attached to his aunt who has just left, and it has just happened by material providence that you've been together. But ultimately, the reality is that you're a servant full time of Krishna, and your actual position is in the spiritual world, and that this material nature is just an aberration. It's a cloud. It's a temporary covering of who you are. It's like it's a mirage. It's an illusion, and just like the mirage of society. I mean, you see nowadays people are back in O'Connell Street, and they're in all the regalia. The sun is out, and their new outfits are there, and people are trying to take advantage of being this is I'm back again, and this is me, and can you not see me, and this is what I do, and people are trying to basically take the center stage, or I'm the center of the world, or I'm the center of my world anyway, but yet this is a mirage, and the little tiny drop of nectar that people get, and I'm saying this to myself, I'm not trying to say it to anybody else, the promise of sex life, of coupling with the most beautiful person of your dreams, and so I'm that person. So people are going around parading themselves as God ultimately, the person who can fulfill all desires since time immemorial. But what have you got? You've got this stinking body, It might be dressed up with perfumes and so on, but ultimately inside is a stinking body, this horrible mixture of mucus and blood and stool and pus and urine and amoebic living entities who are eating away inside, and then it's another word for the body. For the body is a disease. It's just a diseased state. So we're going around trying to attract people to us this horrible mixture. It's a total illusion, but we're still attracted by this. So we have to become attracted to Krishna and Krishna's pastimes, and actually that's our position of beauty, because we are actually beautiful as well, and that's the ironic thing. There is that beauty there, but it's not in that mirage. It's in the pastimes of Krishna, because we're part of those pastimes. That's our constitutional position. We're a part and parcel servant of the servant of the servant of the Supreme, and that's who we are. That's actually our beautiful position, and it's a wonderful life to understand that and try to maintain that. Now, it's a disastrous place that we're trying to perform it in, but we have great help. We've got the Shastra, we've got the devotees, and we've got Krishna as a super soul. So these are all our helps to try to convince us and to try to show us that this is where we should be. Okay, I've gone on a little bit further than I expected. But anyway, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement in this path can save one from the most greatest type of fear, which is to fall down again into this damn illusion. Let's not get stuck in it again. No matter how beautiful seeming this material world seems to be, it is an illusion. It is a mirage. It is it's like the drop of water. That's what a mirage is. You get a drop of water instead of the ocean. You get one drop. One tiny little drop. It's not going to satisfy. you just go back again into the mechanicals, like it's the way as seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Hrideshe Arjuna Tishtate, Brahmayan Sarvabhutane, Yantrurudani Mayaya. And like this is it's a clunking, it's a gross machine that's clunking away. That's been pointed out here by Krishna. Don't get stuck in this machine. My wonderful cousin in France, unfortunately, had a very, very severe accident when he was younger. He was working on a farm and his arms got stuck into the threshing machine, and both arms had to be removed. But that's like this horrible machine, this horrible material world. We've got to get out of this clunking, and just for a little bit of it's a little bit of nectar. There's this example of the person who's just about on a gorge. He's about to be fallen. He's and then there's just a little drop of honey coming down, and he's relishing this honey, even though he's about to be, fall into a big abyss, but still, the tongue is just attracted by this little bit of honey. That's our unfortunate position, and we somehow have to be strong. We have to gain the strength of the Shastra, of the association of devotees, of the order of the spiritual master. All of these things are giving us the strength to move on and not to be affected. This is what I'm doing anyway. I'm hopelessly attracted to Maya, in one form or another. Whether it is when I come back and I see a big, my particular penchant is a big can of yogurt after a Greek yogurt at that, it's even better. And then you might even put in some sugar into it. But, then you get stuck into enjoying, you get stuck into it, you forget that you're a servant of Krishna. Now, Krishna may provide that for you or may not provide that for you. The devotees in the six Goswamis, they even forgot to eat. But I'm always thinking about eating or whatever. But this is the point then. We're always struggling one way or another. So we have to become expert at becoming strong. Okay, so that's the message on this morning. I've gone on a bit longer than expected. Okay, Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Canto 1, chapter 13, text number